Okay, good morning to all of you. This morning we will take up chapter number 2 in statistics, collection of data on page 9. Please keep your books with you. Collection of data, chapter 2 on page 9. Now in the previous chapter, you have read about what is economics. You also studied about the role and the importance of statistics in economics. Now in this chapter, you will study the sources of data and the mode of data collection. Mode means the methods of data collection. The purpose of collection of data is to show evidence for reaching a sound and a clear solution to a problem. In economics, you often come across a statement like this. After many fluctuations, the output of food grains rose to 132 million tons in 1978-79 from 108 million tons in 1970-71, but fell to 108 million tons in 1979-80. Production of food grains then rose continuously to 252 million tons in 2015 and 16 and touched 272 million tons in 2016-17. Now, in this statement, you can observe that the food grain production in different years does not remain the same. It varies from year to year and from crop to crop. As these values vary, they are called variables. We can underline that statement. As the values vary means differ, they are called variables. The variables are generally represented by letters X, Y, or Z, and each value of the variable is an observation. For example, the food grain production in India varies between 108 million tons in 1970-71 to 272 million tons in 2016 and 17, as shown in the following table. The years are represented by the variable X, and the production of food grains in India in million tons is represented by the variable Y. So here the values of those variables X and Y are the data from which we can obtain information about the production of food grains in India. To know the fluctuations in food grain production, we need the data on the production of food grains in India for various years. Now, data is a tool which helps in understanding the problems by providing information. You must be wondering, where do data come from and how do we collect these? In the following sections, we will discuss the types of data, the method, and the instruments of data collection and the sources of obtaining data. Now, what are the sources of data? Statistical data can be obtained from two sources. The researcher may collect the data by conducting an inquiry, and such data are called primary data. Kindly underline that statement. Researcher may collect data by conducting an inquiry, and such data are called primary data as they are based on first-hand information. So any information collected first-hand is termed in statistics as primary data. Suppose you want to know what about the popularity of a film star among school students. For this, you will have to inquire from a large number of school students by asking questions from them to collect the desired information. And the data which you get is an example of primary data. So data collected first hand, directly from the source, is called primary data. If the data have been collected and processed, by process we mean they are scrutinized and they are tabulated by some other agency, then they are called secondary data. They are called secondary data. Please underline these two lines also. They can be obtained either from published sources such as government reports, documents, newspapers, books written by economists, or from any other source. For example, you could also collect data from a website. Thus, the data are primary to the source that collects and processes them for the first time, and it is secondary for all sources that later use such data. So if you have collected data and stored it, for you that is your primary data. But after you have collected data, you have sorted them out in some form, either in a tabular form, or you have put them in another, let's say, different in a report form, and somebody else uses your data. For them, that data is a secondary data. Thus, the data are primarily accessed to the source and secondary for all those sources which later use such data. Now, the use of secondary data saves time and cost. For example, after collecting the data on the popularity of the film star among students, you will publish a report, and if somebody uses the data collected by you for a similar study, it becomes your secondary data. How do we collect the data? Do you know how a manufacturer decides about a product, or how a political party decides about a candidate? They conduct a survey by asking questions about a particular product or a candidate from a large group of people. And the purpose of the surveys is to describe some characteristics like price, quality, usefulness in case of a product, when a manufacturer wants to know which product to produce or not to produce. These are some of the things he would look into. And popularity, honesty, loyalty, if in the case of a candidate, a political party wants to select a candidate, what would they be looking for? They would be looking for the popularity, how popular the person is, his honesty, his loyalty, etc. So the purpose of a survey is to collect data, and survey is a method of gathering information from individuals. Preparation of instruments. The most common type of instrument used in surveys is a questionnaire. It is an interview schedule. The questionnaire is either self-administered by the respondent or administered by the researcher, who is called an enumerator or a trained investigator. So what does this mean, children? simply means that when you give a questionnaire to a person, either a person reads it himself, the questions, and he answers the question, or an enumerator may come along with a questionnaire, hands it over to you, sits with you and explains the question and asks you to fill up the answer. While preparing the questionnaire or an interview schedule, you should keep in mind the following points. What are those points? First, that the questionnaire should not be too long. The number of questions should be as minimum as possible, because nobody would like to take a test sitting with you and answering your questions. You got to do it as quick as possible with the least amount of questions, and so that the people are willing to answer. If you keep on going on asking questions, people will just give up and will not answer the questions. So keep your questions not too long, minimum. Second, the questionnaire should be easy to understand and avoid ambiguous or difficult words. Ambiguous means something which is vague, something which is not clear. So don't use very big words where a person cannot understand. Use simple words. Use words which can be very clearly understood by the person from whom you are collecting the information. The third, the questions should be arranged in an order such that the person answering should feel comfortable. And fourth, the series of questions should move from general to specific. The questionnaire should start from general questions and proceed to more specific ones. For example, a poor question would be, is increase in electricity charges justified? And then you go to ask, is the electricity supply in your locality regular? Why is this a poor questioning? Because first of all, a good questioner would always ask first, is the electricity supply in your locality regular? He would answer yes or no. And on that basis, then you would ask the second question. What was that? Is the increase in electricity charges justified? Now it makes better sense. So what he says is the series of questions should move from the general to the specific. The general is, are you satisfied with the electricity supply in your locality? There could be two answers, a yes or a no. And after the general, then you go for the specific by asking him, is the increase in electricity charges justified? So the questions also should be precise and clear. For example, a poor question would be, what percentage of your income do you spend on clothing in order to look presentable? What makes it a good question? What percentage of your income do you spend on clothing? Enough. Why do you want to ask him, you spending money on clothes for that you look presentable? Wouldn't he be presentable otherwise also? Okay. So then the question should not be ambiguous. They should enable the respondents to answer quickly, correctly, and clearly. So I already told you ambiguous means something vague questions, not clear questions should not be asked. They should be avoided. For example, your poor question would be, do you spend a lot of money on books in a month? A good question to that would be, tick mark the appropriate option. How much do you spend on books in a month? Choices are there. Less than 200, rupees 200 to 300, rupees 300 to 400, or more than rupees 400. The question should not use their double negatives. The question starting with wouldn't you or don't you should be avoided, as they may lead to biased responses. For example, a poor question, don't you think smoking should be prohibited? Now this is a negative. What are you supposed to make him answer? You already want him to answer yes. And you are prompting him by this question by asking him, don't you think smoking should be prohibited? So what would be a better question? Do you think smoking should be prohibited? The question should not be a leading question, which gives a clue about how the respondent would answer. For example, how do you like the flavor of this high quality tea? Now you are making the person, forcing the person to say, oh, it's very good. It's very nice, high quality tea. So this is a poor question because you are leading him on. A good question would be, how do you like the flavor of this tea? The question should not indicate alternatives to the answer. For example, a poor question, would you like to do a job after college or be a housewife? A good question would be, what would you like to do after college? The questionnaire may consist of closed-ended or structured questions or open-ended or unstructured questions. The above questions about what a student wants to do after college is an open-ended question. Close-ended or structured questions can either be a two-way question or a multiple choice question. When there are only two possible answers of a yes or a no, it is called a two-way question. When there is a possibility of more than two options of answers, multiple choice questions are more appropriate. For examples, why did you sell your land? Options are given. To pay off the debts, to finance children's education, to invest in another property, any other, please specify. Close-ended questions are easy to use, score, and to codify for analysis because all respondents can choose from the given options. But they are difficult to write as the alternatives should be clearly written to represent both sides of the issue. There is also a possibility that an individual's true response is not present among the options given. For this, the choice of any other is provided. Where the respondent can write a response which was not anticipated by the researcher. Moreover, another limitation of multiple choice questions is that they tend to restrict the answers by providing alternatives without which the respondents may have answered differently. Open-ended questions allow for more individualized responses, but they are difficult to interpret and hard to score since there are a lot of variations in the responses. For example, what is your view about globalizations? There may be various views, unlimited views. Mode of data collection. Have you ever come across a television show in which reporters ask the questions from children, housewives, or general public regarding their examination, performance, or a brand of soap or a political party? The purpose of asking questions is to do a survey for collection of data. There are three basic ways of collecting data: personal interviews, mailing questionnaires, surveys, and third, telephone interviews. First one, personal interviews. This method is used when the researcher has access to all the members. The researcher or an investigator conducts a face-to-face interview with the respondent. Personal interviews are preferred due to various reasons. Personal contact is made between the respondent and the interviewer. The interviewer has the opportunity of explaining the study and answering the queries of the respondents. So sometimes when the respondent is not able to understand the question, then the investigator would help him to explain the question, make him understand what the question is asking of him. The interviewer has the opportunity of explaining the study and answering the queries, the questions of the respondents. The interviewer can request the respondent to expand on his answer that are particularly important. So any point which he wants more answers from the person, he can prompt him. Can you elaborate? Can you explain a little more? Okay. Misinterpretation and misunderstanding can be avoided. Watching the reactions of respondents can provide supplementary information. Personal interview has some demerits too. It is expensive as it requires trained interviewers. It takes a longer time to complete the survey. Why? Because they got to go from house to house, person to person. It will take time. It takes longer time to complete the survey. The presence of the researcher may inhibit respondents from saying what they really think. Now, when the person asking directly, sometimes the person may have a certain jijak, what they call in Hindi, because he's there. How can I answer this question? If he was not there, I would have answered it freely. So there is a certain inhibition where the respondents would not very clearly answer the questions. This is about personal interviews. Moreover, personal interview, you can have eye contact. At once you can know whether the person who is talking or giving an answer, whether he is speaking the truth or whether he is just giving an answer for the sake of giving an answer. Okay. Then the next is mailing questionnaire. We are running out of time. We are already at 8:59, 9 o'clock. It finishes 1 minute more. According to my watch, this is going to switch off any moment. So we will continue this tomorrow at the same time.